Listen, I need to tell you something that's going to sound harsh at first, but I promise you, if you stick with me through this conversation, it's going to change everything about how you approach women, relationships, and honestly, your entire life. You're fighting the wrong war, and it's costing you everything you actually want. I see you there watching this video, probably feeling frustrated, maybe even angry, wondering why despite all your efforts, despite being a good guy, despite trying your hardest, women just don't seem to want you. They ghost you, they friend zone you, they lose interest, or they never show interest in the first place. And here's what I know about you without even meeting you. You've probably been told to be yourself, to be nice, to treat women with respect, to show them how much you care, to prove your worth, to demonstrate your loyalty, to be available, to be understanding, to be supportive. And you've done all of that, haven't you? You've opened doors, you've listened to their problems, you've been their emotional support, you've shown up when they needed you, you've been the perfect gentleman, and yet somehow, you're still alone, still frustrated, still wondering what you're doing wrong. But here's the thing that nobody wants to tell you, and it's going to sting. The problem isn't that you're not good enough. The problem isn't that women are shallow or cruel, or that they only want bad boys. The problem is that you're operating from a place of scarcity, desperation, and validation seeking, and women can smell that from a mile away. You're fighting a war for their attention, their approval, their love, when the only war worth fighting is the one inside yourself. You've been conditioned by society, by movies, by well-meaning friends and family, to believe that if you just try hard enough, if you just prove yourself worthy enough, if you just show enough interest and investment, women will eventually see your value and choose you. But that's not how attraction works, that's not how desire works, and that's certainly not how respect works. Think about it for a moment. When was the last time you were attracted to someone who was desperately trying to get your attention? When was the last time you respected someone who was constantly seeking your validation? When was the last time you wanted to be around someone who made you feel like you were their entire world, their only source of happiness, their reason for existing? Never, right? Because neediness repels. Desperation repels. Validation-seeking repels. And that's exactly what you've been doing, without even realizing it. You've been approaching women from a position of weakness, not strength. You've been trying to get something from them, instead of having something to offer them. You've been making them responsible for your happiness, your self-worth, your sense of identity, and that's an impossible burden for anyone to carry. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in real life. You meet a woman you're interested in, and immediately, your entire focus shifts to her. You start texting her constantly, always available, always responding immediately. You cancel plans with friends to be available for her. You agree with everything she says because you don't want to create conflict. You put her on a pedestal, treating her like she's perfect, like she can do no wrong. You showered her with compliments, gifts, attention, hoping that somehow the sheer volume of your investment will make her fall for you. But what actually happens? She starts pulling away. She becomes less responsive. She seems less interested. And you, in your panic, double down on the same strategy that's already failing. You try harder, you give more, you become even more available, even more agreeable, even more invested. And the more you do this, the less attractive you become to her. Now I want you to imagine a different scenario. Imagine a man who is genuinely content with his life. He has his own goals, his own passions, his own friends, his own interests. He's not looking for a woman to complete him because he's already complete. When he meets a woman he's interested in, he's curious about her, but he's not needy for her attention. He has standards, he has boundaries, he has his own life that he's not willing to sacrifice for someone he barely knows. He's friendly and respectful, but he's not trying to prove anything to her. He's not seeking her validation because he already validates himself. He's not afraid of losing her because he knows his worth doesn't depend on any one person's opinion of him. Which man do you think is more attractive? Which man do you think women respect more? Which man do you think has healthier, more fulfilling relationships? The answer is obvious, but here's why this is so hard for most men to understand, and even harder to implement. We live in a culture that has completely feminized the approach to dating and relationships. We've been told that emotions are everything, that sensitivity is the highest virtue, that being vulnerable means being weak, that pursuing your own goals is selfish, that having standards is shallow, that maintaining boundaries is mean. We've been told that the way to a woman's heart is through endless emotional labor, constant availability, and complete self-sacrifice. But this approach doesn't create attraction. It creates obligation at best and resentment at worst. Here's what I learned the hard way, and what I wish someone had told me years ago. Women don't want a man who needs them. They want a man who chooses them. They don't want someone who has nothing better to do than focus on them. They want someone who has a full, rich, interesting life, and still chooses to include them in it. They don't want someone who agrees with everything they say. They want someone who has his own opinions, his own values, his own backbone. They don't want someone who's available 24/7. They want someone whose time is valuable, whose attention is earned, whose presence is a privilege, not a given. But this doesn't mean being an asshole. This doesn't mean being cruel or dismissive or treating women badly. This doesn't mean playing games or being manipulative. This means being a man who knows his own worth and doesn't need external validation to feel good about himself. This means being someone who has his own mission, his own purpose, his own reason for existing that has nothing to do with getting a girlfriend. This means being attractive not because you're trying to be attractive, but because you're genuinely focused on becoming the best version of yourself. Let me tell you about the real war you should be fighting. It's not against women who reject you. It's not against society giving you bad advice. It's not against other men who seem to have figured it out. The real war is against the voice in your head that tells you you're not enough as you are. The real war is against the conditioning that makes you believe your worth comes from external validation. The real war is against the scarcity mindset that makes you desperate for any woman's attention. The real war is against the people-pleasing tendencies that make you sacrifice your own needs and desires to avoid conflict. The real war is against the lack of purpose and direction in your own life that makes you look to relationships to fill the void. This is the war that actually matters because when you win this war, everything else changes. When you stop seeking validation from women, you become more attractive to them. When you stop being desperate for their attention, they start competing for yours. When you stop putting them on pedestals, they start respecting you as an equal. When you stop making them responsible for your happiness, they start enjoying being around you. When you start living for yourself first, you become someone worth being with. I know this sounds counterintuitive, especially if you've been raised to believe that love means self-sacrifice, that caring means constant availability, that commitment means losing yourself in another person. But think about the women in your life that you respect most. Are they needy and desperate for male attention? Do they drop everything for any guy who shows interest? Do they have no standards, no boundaries, no life of their own? Of course not. The women you respect most are confident, independent, selective. They have their own goals, their own interests, their own standards. They don't need a man to complete them. They want a partner who adds value to their already fulfilling life. So why would you expect them to be attracted to a man who doesn't have these same qualities? Here's where most men get it wrong. They think that by being the opposite of a stereotypical bad boy, by being available instead of aloof, agreeable instead of challenging, invested instead of independent, they'll be more attractive to women. But what they don't realize is that they're still operating from the same flawed premise. They're still trying to be attractive to women instead of just being attractive, period. They're still making women the center of their universe instead of making themselves the center of their own universe. They're still seeking external validation instead of generating internal validation. The truth is, attraction isn't a choice. Women don't sit down and logically decide to be attracted to someone based on how nice they are or how much they care. Attraction is an emotional response to certain qualities and behaviors. And the qualities that create attraction are confidence, independence, purpose, standards, boundaries, self-respect, and emotional strength. These aren't things you can fake or perform. These are things you have to actually develop within yourself. So, how do you develop these qualities? How do you win the war against yourself? It starts with understanding that you are already enough. You don't need a woman to validate your worth. You don't need a relationship to be happy. You don't need anyone's approval to live your life on your own terms. Your value as a man doesn't come from how many women want you or how successful you are at dating. Your value comes from who you are, what you stand for, what you're building, what you're contributing to the world. This means developing a life that you're genuinely excited about, whether there's a woman in it or not. This means pursuing goals that matter to you, not because they'll impress women, but because they fulfill you. This means building friendships, hobbies, interests, skills that make you a more complete, interesting, capable person. This means having standards for how you want to be treated and being willing to walk away from anyone who doesn't meet those standards, regardless of how attractive they are or how much you want their approval. When you start living this way, something magical happens. You stop being desperate. You stop being needy. You stop being available to everyone and start being selective about who gets access to your time and energy. You start attracting people who appreciate what you have to offer instead of chasing people who don't. You start building relationships based on mutual respect and genuine connection instead of one-sided investment and validation seeking. But here's the hard part. This requires you to give up the victim mentality. This requires you to stop blaming women for not appreciating you and start taking responsibility for becoming someone worth appreciating. This requires you to stop looking for shortcuts and start doing the actual work of personal development. This requires you to face the uncomfortable truth that maybe you haven't been as attractive as you thought you were, not because of your looks or your bank account, but because of your mindset and your approach. I remember when this finally clicked for me. I had been doing everything wrong for years. I was the nice guy who finished last, the friend who got used for emotional support, the guy who tried so hard to prove his worth that he lost all sense of his own identity. I was angry at women for not seeing how good I was, frustrated with the world for being unfair, bitter about other guys who seemed to have it easier. But then I realized that my anger wasn't really about women at all. It was about me. I was angry at myself for being weak, for being needy, for not having the courage to be who I really was, for seeking validation from people who didn't even know me. That's when everything changed. I stopped trying to be what I thought women wanted and started becoming who I actually was. I stopped seeking approval and started living according to my own values. I stopped being available to everyone and started being selective about who earned my time and attention. I stopped putting women on pedestals and started seeing them as human beings with their own flaws and insecurities. I stopped making relationships my primary goal and started making personal growth my priority. And you know what happened? Women started being attracted to me, not because I was trying to attract them, but because I had become
Tamam, şu an
genuinely
gözükmüyor.
attractive. Not because I was playing games or being manipulative, but because I was finally being authentic. Not because I had figured out some secret technique, but because I had won the war against my own insecurities and neediness. This is what I want for you. I want you to understand that the problem was never that you weren't good enough. The problem was that you were fighting the wrong battle. You were trying to win a war against women's preferences when you should have been fighting a war against your own limitations. You were trying to change their minds when you should have been changing yourself. You were looking for external solutions to internal problems. The women who reject you aren't your enemies. They're actually doing you a favor by showing you that you're not ready yet. They're reflecting back to you the energy you're putting out into the world. If you're putting out desperate, needy, validation-seeking energy, that's what you're going to get back. If you start putting out confident, self-assured, purposeful energy, that's what you'll attract. So stop fighting the wrong war. Stop trying to convince women to want you and start becoming someone they naturally want to be around. Stop seeking their validation and start validating yourself. Stop making them responsible for your happiness and start taking responsibility for creating a life you love. Stop being a victim of circumstances and start being the author of your own story. The real war is with yourself, and it's a war you can win. But only if you're willing to do the work, face the truth, and commit to becoming the man you're capable of being. The choice is yours. You can keep fighting the wrong war and getting the same results, or you can start fighting the right war and change everything. What's it going to be?